I would like to bring on Senator Mike Lee to talk about what's happening on the federal level. Senator?
Thanks so much, Clint. Thanks for all of you for joining us for this. And I want to commend Silicon Slopes and all those who were involved in it and who helped make it a success for their involvement and their participation. This is a great example of businesses and individuals and families coming together in a way that no government ever could. You can operate far more efficiently than we do. There's a place for government, and sometimes it's necessary for us to step in. We don't ever do anything as well as you all do, so I appreciate that. I want to give you just a brief update on where we're focusing our efforts. We've, of course, had these 3 phases of coronavirus legislation. Phase 1 was dedicated to building up $8.5 billion of funds to be made available for local governments and for healthcare infrastructure to get ready for the virus. Phase 2 dealt with paid sick leave. It created a big, huge problem because there was a drafting error in it. People recognized that we need to help people who might get furloughed as a result of the virus. They didn't realize until after it had been passed that it's going to result in this perverse incentive to fire workers. I drafted an amendment working through the night with a number of my colleagues. We voted on that amendment. We got a majority of the U.S. Senate to vote for that amendment, but unfortunately, through a quirk of the Senate's own procedures, that amendment wasn't in the final version of phase 2, forcing me to vote against it. Our job is to first do no harm. We can't pass a law with my vote that's going to harm the very people who are supposed to be helped by that law. I'm trying to get that fixed in phase 3. Phase 3 has as its focus encouraging and promoting liquidity within the marketplace and getting money out to those who need it most. It's still under negotiation. And so we don't know what's in it because I don't know what's in it yet. I can't tell you what its likelihood of passage is or the likelihood of my supporting it. I'm working with my staff right now to improve it, to make it better, and to fix the errors, the harms that were done through phase 2.
Senator, I have a follow-up question just real quick on the relief bill that you voted against. And I heard your explanation there. We know that Senator Mitt Romney voted for it. Can you go a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah.
On why you voted against that and kind of what the process is like out there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So phase 2 passed the House of Representatives last Friday night in the middle of the night. Members had the opportunity to see it for exactly 15 minutes between midnight Friday night and 12:15 when the House voted on it. It was a 110-page bill. Over the weekend, they found 90 pages of technical corrections they needed to make. Ordinarily, that's not considered a technical correction. Usually, a technical correction is when you've got to add a comma that you left out, or you forgot to insert the word not or something. This one replaced 90 of the 110 pages on Monday. Between when we received the bill on Tuesday and when we had to vote on it on Wednesday, I identified this error, which we all acknowledge the most important people for us to protect in this legislation are those who are workers likely to be displaced as a result of the virus, likely to be furloughed or otherwise out of work for a period of time, either because they get sick or someone in their family or their office does. For those people, we all agree that we've got to help them. The way that the House passed bill quote unquote helps them is to put a new mandate on employers to pay into a system to expend significant costs, creating a new paid sick leave program for them. As we all know, you get what you incentivize, and what you incentivize here is shrinking your workforce, firing existing workers so that you don't have to incur the additional expense associated with it. I found another way of doing it. It would cost the government more money, but it was an expense worth incurring here by saying, rather than put that expense on the employer, which is going to result in people getting fired, put the expense on the unemployment insurance program, which the federal government would then backfill. This would solve the problem. A majority of senators agreed, but through a procedural quirk, it didn't get in there. So the bill we passed will actually harm people. It's going to result in massive layoffs if we don't fix it. That's why I voted against the bill as a whole after the amendment wasn't included in the final vote. I can't speak for Mitt Romney or any of the people who voted for it, but I will say this. Those who were critical of those of us who voted against it hadn't read the bill. They did not understand the quirk they were talking about. I'm not going to speak for any particular colleague, but on the whole, those who were criticizing it didn't grasp what we were trying to do.
So when can Americans and Utahns expect to get relief from the federal government here, do you think, Senator?
Phase 3 is going to be the bill that most likely affects the most people directly, including through a series of direct payments that are currently under the current Republican proposal. We're supposed to be set at about $1,200 per adult and $500 per child, phasing out at $150,000 in family income for a married couple filing jointly, $75,000 for an individual filer. Those checks, assuming this legislation is passed, it's likely to be passed in the Senate by Monday or Tuesday, passed in the House within 24 hours after that, signed into law by the president immediately. The assumption is that within a week or two, people will start receiving their first direct payment checks.
How is Utah doing in comparison to other states in the country? I mean, you're tracking this, as representing Utah in the United States Senate, but you're also, in there, DC, and you've been in meetings with, I'm sure, the president and others on this issue. How are we doing in comparison to other states? I mean, you're seeing California say, basically mandating everybody stay home. I believe Illinois or Ohio, one of those states, just barely did that before we came on this call. How are we doing? How are the local elected officials doing here? And just on a whole, how is Utah comparing?
From my perspective and the perspective of my colleagues and people in the executive branch of government, Utah's doing phenomenally well. Look, we're all in this together and we're all struggling. But Utah is ahead of the curve, in part because of organizations like Silicon Slopes, and in part because we've got a state government that works better than most state governments. I was very skeptical of Governor Gavin Newsom's order last night. I thought it was draconian. I thought it was chilling. The way he set up that order. I think it sends a lot of the wrong messages. Utah, on the other hand, is encouraging people to do the right thing rather than acting with overly heavy hand.
Senator, you're breaking up just a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, you're back here. How are you and your family dealing with this personally?
Well, it's hard. My family is all in Utah, and I'm here. We talk on the phone every day, multiple times a day, over the phone and by text. They are all sheltering in place and using social isolation as a tool. My son James is a second-year law student at BYU, and they've canceled class there. Yesterday, his wife sent a text to our family group text, a short video clip of James in their apartment going to the window and saying, "Help, I'm an extrovert and I'm succumbing to the dangers of social isolation. I need attention." So we gave him attention through the family text chain. But it's one of the things that somebody has to do to stay sane. In the meantime, I miss my family. I can't go back until this is done, but I hope they're doing well. From what they tell me, they are.
On this town hall, you have business leaders, CEOs, executives, employees. I mean, this is being streamed on all of Silicon Slopes' social media channels as well. How can Silicon Slopes help? How can business help? How can community leaders and community organizations who aren't elected officials or in government help?
Well, first of all, just keep doing what you all are doing. Every one of my colleagues is envious of the institutions of civil society that we have within our state. People like you and like Ryan Smith and like Mark Newman, with whom I've been in contact over the last couple of days, talking about what you're doing. I'm very grateful for everything you're doing to prepare for this illness, to prepare to help people to cope with it. So I would encourage people to just continue to find ways where you can make an individual difference. In a conversation I had with Mark Newman last night, he was pointing out to me that incremental steps, when he can find donations to be made, even, I think he used the word micro donation or micro quantity, he can add to the overall extent to which we're alleviating human suffering. And it's not just the suffering that we're going to encounter as we enter this next 2 to 3 week period, where I had a good meeting at the White House the other day, and I was given the explanation by some of our top security experts, then the most difficult initial wave of this, we don't know how long it'll last, but it'll be within the next 2 to 3 weeks when this wave hits us really hard. So it's not only the experience of that wave itself and what comes after it, but it's also the imminent apprehension of that wave hitting can be devastating. And so for that reason, what you're preparing to do not only calms people as they go through the experience, but also as they approach it.
Senator, if you can stay on for a minute, we have a Q&A thing for those inside of this town hall on Zoom. If you have questions for Senator Lee, please put them in there. Senator Lee, I have a similar question on the small business front. On a previous call, we talked to Senator Romney about this issue. And, he was thinking about maybe doing 100% guaranteed SBA loans. What are they thinking on the federal side of this to help small businesses? And what are you supporting on that front?
Yeah, Senator Romney is right. And it looks like we're moving in that direction. In the proposal that was published yesterday by Senator McConnell, and it's being negotiated right now with Senator Schumer, we would have SBA loans covering up to 100%. And we'd also see one thing that might ease some of the burden, even if we can't get the fix for phase 2 in there. One of the things that might ease some of the burden associated with phase 2 that I described a minute ago is that they would not require any payments back from small business during the affected period. If during that affected period, the companies in question continued to pay their payroll, continued to pay their employees, rather than furloughing them or letting them go. So there is going to be substantial relief for small business in this bill. We're not exactly sure what it's going to look like, but it's going to be substantial. We're talking about $150 billion or so that will be available for small business specifically, with 100% attached to it.
We're getting so many questions as we're streaming here, Senator Lee, about just how to keep small businesses from going bankrupt.
Yeah, well, we've been focusing a lot on that, and I've had a lot of conversations with business and government leaders across Utah over the last week, many of which have had a significant impact on what we've discussed here in the Senate. The other day, for example, Tuesday night, as I was working on this amendment with a few of my colleagues, I got a call from Speaker Brad Wilson. Brad told me what he was thinking as far as what banks would like to be able to do. Banks and credit unions, lenders generally, when approaching small businesses, would love to make clear to them that for at least the next couple of months, at least for April and for May, they're going to be willing to look at payments coming in and to suspend them without taking any adverse action against the borrower. What that's going to do is allow them to maintain their other fixed costs without risk of going bankrupt or having their assets seized or their loans foreclosed upon. And then they'll be able to move forward and hopefully be able to keep their business intact and their workers working. One of the key impediments to this could be with the banks and the credit unions themselves. I made a bunch of phone calls on that, talked to my friends on the banking committee and in the Senate, the chairman of the banking committee included. And what I've concluded is that most of the lenders in our state and nationally would prefer not to have to take any adverse action. So it's a regulatory question. So I looked into the regulators. I had a good conversation yesterday with Mary Daly, who's the president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, which of course takes in many Western states, including our own. She confirmed what I had heard from my colleagues after discussing this with them. This has now become a common conversation in the Senate. In addition to legislation that we're going to enact to provide relief, we're also seeing that we're going to have regulatory relief provided by the banking and credit union regulators and make clear that there won't be any adverse regulatory consequence to the lender by choosing to forego any options they may have for payments missed in April and in May. I think this will go a long way toward maintaining liquidity in the marketplace and keeping businesses intact so that they don't have to fire employees, so that they don't have to go bankrupt, so that they can stay in business. Is look, this wave is coming, but it's going to pass. It's not going to be easy, but the first wave of it, once it passes, I think is going to allow us to exhale and get back to work. But it's that critical first 2 months that it's going to be most important. Fortunately, the entire country, and I can say virtually every member of the United States Senate, is focused first and foremost on small business.
Senator, thanks so much for coming on.